Alright, so here finally we come to the point where I'm gonna actually show you what it is and how it works. So, whatever. As you already know, entity component system is basically three abstractions, right? So, if I would want to use a Unity object as an entity, there we go. It is a game object. Now I'm adding a ball to it, so now it is just an object with a ball in it. So let's say it's a ball. But if I add two balls, now it's a different object, right? So the root object has to somehow define it, so we can call it say two balls. Two balls. Alright, so now we have sort of an abstraction that tells us what it is. Now if I want to access any of those balls, what could I do? I could possibly use their name to find them, or create a script that has references to them, or some other way to give meaning to link the whole system together. Like, in ECS we call the composition of such things as an entity. So in Ursa we have a concrete class that's called entity. So by adding entity right here on the top level, we just told Ursa that this thing, the whole thing, is just one unit. So if let's just look at the difference. So if we say you have a game object here, and the game object has a ball here and a ball here, so yeah, so these are two completely separate things that you can access, somehow link together, and yada yada. Now let's have a more complex scenario so you can understand how it is useful to solving such problems. So let's say we have a very deep hierarchy of different things here that do stuff and whatnot. So, alright, where do we have our cylinder? Alright, so now let's say I want my cylinder to do something, so I would add, do I have anything? No, I don't have anything. Let's imagine I'm adding it to some rotational thing to it, so now it rotates, and this makes particle effects and whatnot. So now to find those components deeply inside the entity, I would have to perform searches. I would have to go through them and somehow link and understand what it does. So these things can be very easily solved in Ursa by using the entity as an abstract way to access the components. So if we forget for a second that we have this, and instead we think of the whole thing as this, it's not even that. Let's say some of those have a component, some of those don't. So only two of those have a component. So an entity in that case would be just a way to abstract this into this. So entity as an object has a way to access entity components. So in Ursa we have a separate, we have a special component. It's not when I will refer in future videos to Ursa components, I would say a component. When an ECS component, when I talk about Unity components, I would say a mono or a mono behavior. So there's a clear separation between them. Ursa makes use of mono behaviors. They are, of course, they are the basis of the whole thing. However, the pure mono behaviors can still be utilized inside entities, inside stuff, to add functionality that doesn't require the entity itself to be aware of what's going on in it. I'll explain about it later. So so we have a class called component base. We don't use it directly, we only inherit from it. It itself inherits from a mono behavior, and all it does is registers itself in the pool on the beginning, so that's a necessary thing for the system to function. And it has some accessor, so if we access its entity property, it's gonna recursively find its entity on the game object. Until it finds it, then it will cache it. So alright, for now we're gonna remove it, and let's say we want this thing to have some rotation. So let's simulate some game scenario. So first of all, I'm gonna create a new component, which again is an SES entity component. So we're gonna say current rotation. Just call it rotation. Alright. So I have a template that created this script automatically for me, with populated with all the stuff that is needed to exist here. So again, it inherits from component base, and it overrides the enable and disable. This is necessary, sadly, because of how Unity sends its magic methods events. So without this on the top, in the inheritance hierarchy, on the top class, we won't receive on enable and on disable. That is sad, but that's what it is. So in this component, I gonna right now just have a public float current rotation, let's say, so we don't get current rotation. And let's add it to our to something. What do we have here? Let's say this. So now what we think of it is that we have an entity that has a rotation component on it. Now if we add another entity somewhere in another place, here for example, that is making it jump or something like that, some jumper component, it doesn't make it jump. It doesn't have any logic, as you can see. It doesn't make it rotate. It's not its responsibility. All it does is just holds the data. That's all it does. Now, if I want to access this rotation component, I would say I would possibly just if I wanted to access it through the entity, it's very easy to do because entity has get components. So I can just say get entity component, and no matter how deeply in hierarchy the component is located, I would get it just if it was one object, right? Another example is if I have a rotator here and I try to access the rotation on the same entity, but I don't know where it is. I don't even care. What I do is let's do it right here, so who cares? So I say my entity, give me the entity component that is rotation, and now I will get the rotation, and I will not care where exactly it is located in this entity, inside of it. This way abstracts the actual implementation of the entity, of the collection of game objects, what they do, how they work. I could not care less. All I care is that it has the components I need to process in my systems, and that the systems sometimes require additional components on this entity to work. So instead of referencing everything and somehow coupling and whatnot, I would just, when I need, I would ask for a component, and if it exists in that entity, no matter where it is, I would receive it. And so we would see in code this picture, where entity is simply a list of its components, and it abstracts this so that we don't even think of it. Now, I'll stop here actually.